And unfortunately, sometimes that's what it takes for us to finally open up is the absolute sort of rock bottom of feeling, I can't feel this way anymore. I can't do it. Right? Welcome to the Akashic Recordings. I'm Annette Dalloo, Akashic conduit, channel, and spiritual guidance coach.
And I'm Julia Nalivaiko, storyteller and creative producer of conscious media content, such as this podcast. What you're about to hear is a real-life Akashic Records session with Annette and one of her clients, recorded with their permission. For privacy, their names have been changed, but everything else is real. Stay tuned to the end of each episode, where we deep dive into subjects that come up throughout the session.
Ryan came to me with some questions about something that he had been struggling with for his entire life. In addition to that, he also wanted to connect to some of his childhood wounds, which we do cover towards the end of the session. Good. Take a deep breath. How are you? How is everything going? Fill me in.
I had a week and a half of really weird energies, things happening. Over the last week and a half, I listen to like a lot of music, and typically music helps me with energies and the mood. Live is my favorite band, and I could listen to them anytime. I can't listen to them for some reason. And the only band that I can listen to is Rage Against the Machine. I have no clue what is going on, but for some reason, that's the only music I can tolerate.
So there are different ways that we process the information that is going through our energy field. And oftentimes when we listen to music, it helps us process it in a particular way. And currently, the way that you are processing this anger that you have is not been in a necessarily constructive way. It has sent you spiraling, as you said. So Rage Against the Machine is a band where their energy actually, shockingly enough, is not particularly low, because they sound like they might have a lower energy because of the heaviness of the actual music. But the lyrics and the things that they talk about are, in fact, rather hopeful and uplifting sometimes. And it is talking about being equal in all ways. And it is often talking about the atrocities that happen and how we can be better. A lot of this is helping you to work through this anger. So the trigger point that you had when you reached out to your twin and she did not respond, that was there as a test for you to see where you are energetically in terms of your feelings of abandonment and wounding. This music is helping you to get some of that anger out, because it needs to come out in very constructive ways. And then once you're able to get that anger out and you are able to come back into your balance and feel that even if you text your twin and she does not respond, that you are okay, that you are able to function in your day and it's not going to tank your entire energy just because she doesn't respond. This is helping you to move through this. It's not going to be for a long time. There are certain things that you need to stay away from at certain times. And at this time, you're feeling guided to not listen to it simply because it is not the right time. It brings your energy down too much. Okay. So it's interesting. They're showing me, I had a very similar experience. I didn't realize that this was what it was. So one of my favorite bands is Depeche Mode.
Yes.
I had an experience with my twin flame regarding that band. Actually, I had a few experiences with him regarding that band. We did go see them together. And then there were a couple of experiences that we had that were really positive. And then the last experience I had regarding that was that basically I had seen that he had sent one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs to somebody else. And it infuriated me, like I was so angry and I was just like, how could he possibly do that? I can't believe he just did that. It got me really, really angry at listening to Depeche Mode for a while. Like every time I would listen to Depeche Mode, I'd get really upset.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember this. This was a few years ago, but Depeche Mode came out with a movie. And I was like, oh, I think I'll go and see the movie. And my guides were like, nope, you're not. And I'm like, but why? I want to see it. They're like, nope, because if you do, you're going to get into that anger energy again and that upset energy. And the thing is that, of course, you can be angry and upset about situations that happen like that, but you can't harp on it. You can't keep that anger going. So it's like I was mad for that period of time for whatever happened. I need to let that go. I need to not let that one isolated incident sort of taint an entire experience for a band that I really love. Right?
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of what they're having you work through right now is the attachments to various things that you like and how it attaches various different emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because I've seen them probably 30, 40 times, and they were here in September. And I was set on going to buy tickets, but then everybody else around me was going to see Billy Joel the same night. And I'm like, I can't believe I can't go see them. For 30 years, I've seen them every time they're here. I believe that's, the universe was telling me, nope, you're not going.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that that's okay. It's about where you are in this very moment. And in this very moment, like that's not what you needed. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, understood.
All right. What would you like to cover today in the whole session?
I think the last time we ended and we wanted to talk about my speech impediment and look, the purpose of that. I have no clue how it happened. I've heard, from different people how I began it, and I've done speech therapy. I've gone to all these people who put things over me. There are people that offered electric shock that didn't do anything. So I think we were going to isolate and discuss that.
Okay. All right, let's take a look, because I feel like this goes back further than this lifetime.
Ooh, really? Okay. I did not expect that.
They're showing me your root chakra, like it's really, really hairy, like bright red hair, kind of like a Muppet.
I'm not sure what
I have no idea what that means. Okay, let's ask. I love the visuals they give me sometimes. I'm like, seriously? Like, and I know they do it because they know I'll be able to figure it out eventually, but it's like, the initial hit, I'm like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right. So let's see what does that mean exactly? Oh, it's a filter. Okay. Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So it's like you're tentatively trusting where you are. You're like, okay, I'm out there. I'm gonna be who I am. I'm gonna be out there, and I'm trusting that where I am is where I'm supposed to be. But like you have this filter on the root chakra basically saying, yeah, I trust it, but I don't fully trust it. So I'm gonna filter out some of the stuff that I think that might not be great. And I'm just gonna make sure that doesn't hit my energy field. And that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's a matter of working on that trust. It's like you've created this structure around your stability, like you're very protective. Okay. So then let's move that energy up to your heart chakra. Oh, that's interesting. A lot of the speech impediment is rooted in your heart chakra. I'm just hearing not able to express fully what is in his heart. Okay. And this is something that has gone on for many lifetimes. Okay. So it's connected to the heart and the throat chakra.
Interesting. Okay.
And allow that light to shine down through your crown chakra. Your crown chakra is like, I want to say that recently you've been like not allowing some of the messages to come through. I'm seeing you sort of put your hands on top of your head and like blocking them, like trying to make them not come in.
I know that my intuition says that I'm seeing a lot of the numbers over and over again, 111, 222. But I ask, but I'm not hearing things. I know that I definitely have been speaking to my spirit team, but I haven't received the messages.
Aha. Okay. This is why. This is not necessarily your conscious self, but your subconscious is basically putting your hands on your head saying, no, I don't want the information. I don't want it.
That makes sense because I don't know if you remember the last time I spoke to you, I said, since probably a year or a year and a half, every night, I can't remember the majority of anything that I dream of. There's like a month I remember, but otherwise I can't remember. And all my life, every night I can get up the next day. I remember that. I remember a little bit of that, but I cannot remember anything.
And the thing is that there's a part of you that knows that when you get some of this information, it's going to be painful to work through. For example, like when you get the signs of your twin, it's like you want the signs because you like them and they're encouraging, but at the same time, you don't want them because that means you have to actually deal with the pain that goes along with it. It's kind of this double-edged sword of like, yeah, I know I need to deal with this pain, but I don't want to because it's too painful. So it's kind of going to come to a point where you're going to have to deal with that pain because if you don't, you're not going to be able to move forward. Okay.
A lot of nights I get up in the middle of the night. I can't remember like the dream that I just had, but I can feel that it was with her.
That is a lot of your subconscious and your soul working through some of the things that you need to work through, as well as reminding you the things that are still active in your field.
Okay.
There will be times when I will have dreams of my twin. And for example, it'll be something like my worst fear. Like, I don't know, that he's met somebody completely different and that he's totally in love and they're often getting married. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And why is that giving me that feeling of fear? And why is that making me feel really sad? Because when we have our divine counterpart, all we really want is for that version of our soul to be happy, right? So if he was super happy in this relationship, then in theory, I should be able to say, oh, I hope he's having a beautiful life. What that showed me was that simply that, oh, hey, guess what? You're still having that attachment and you're still having that feeling of sadness regarding him not being in your experience, right?
Got it.
Some of those things are definitely just you working through them. If there was something that you really needed to remember, the guides would definitely, they would make it very clear that you needed to remember it.
Yeah.
They are not subtle about that. That also being said, it's also getting very close to the time where things are starting to pile up for you and you really do need to start working through them. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Whenever you're feeling triggered emotion, whatever it is, don't just move through it and ignore it. You need to move through it. And then you need to actually say, okay, why am I feeling this? What is the origin of this? Where do I need to do the work in order to make sure that the next time this happens, I'm not responding in this way?
I got it. Okay.
All right. So then let's move that energy down into your throat chakra. Right now, I'm feeling very choked up in terms of like not being able to express the emotion that you're feeling. There's a lot of grief and a lot of sadness there. I want to thank Akula, my Akashic guide. Hello. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Archangel Metatron and Archangel Sandalphon for allowing us access to the Akashic Records today. Today, we are opening up the Akashic Records. Okay, so there are 3 lifetimes that we're going to look at here. So you're part of a group of friends. You're all in school and you have absolutely fallen head over heels for this other woman. She has dark hair. She's somewhat mysterious. She has a very warm energy about her. From the second you saw her, you knew that she was somebody that you wanted to connect with in some way. And when it turned out that your twin, who was already part of your group of friends, became friends with her, you were absolutely thrilled. You spent as much time with her as you could. Your twin watched you as you two fell in love. She was hurt by it because she did have feelings for you, but at the same time, they weren't super strong at that time. It was more sort of a teenagery type of crush or a love in that way. But she was definitely disappointed that you were falling in love with this other girl who was her friend. The 5 of you stayed friends for many, many years. You and the girl ended up getting married. She was everything to you. She was everything you could have possibly wanted in terms of a partner. You were almost a perfect match. In terms of soulmates, it was a beautifully symbiotic connection. And that's what you were. You were soulmates. You needed to see this. You needed to see how beautiful a connection can be. You also needed to see how fleeting. It was only 5 years into your marriage that she died. The grief and the pain that you felt was almost unprecedented for anything that you had ever experienced. You felt that it was a cruel joke to have such perfection and then have it taken away from you. Your twin was there comforting you every step of the way. You felt the connection with her, but you didn't feel the connection in terms of the divine union connection that we know of today as twin flames. It was more of a soul connection that you just knew. It felt almost sisterly to you versus romantic. And that's simply because of where your energies were at the time. Your energies were pretty far apart in terms of where you were in your evolution. And so you weren't able to connect on that level just yet. But this experience was meant to happen for various reasons for her as well as for you. And the amount of grief that you felt after your wife died was, and I could just keep on hearing you say that there are no words. There are no words to express what I'm feeling right now. Each one of the friends is trying to help you move forward with your life. Okay. You let go of everything. You eventually lost your job. You eventually lost pretty much everything because you were so rooted in the grief. It was not only grief. This was, so this is where a lot of the anger comes into, because you were so angry at God. You could not be any more angry at God. It's like you wanted to scream at God, but to scream at God would mean to almost like blaspheme yourself. So at this time you were pretty rooted in religion. And so you didn't want to go to hell for blaspheming God. But at the same time, you were really angry. You felt like you couldn't express your anger to anyone, because if you expressed it to God, that would be blaspheming. If you expressed it to your friends, that would be something that you felt that they don't deserve. They don't deserve to get that brunt of your anger and frustration. Mm-hmm. You had no way to express what you were actually expressing. Mm-hmm. So you suppressed it. But you were a shell of a person. You didn't have that spark of life that you had prior. You just went through the motions of your everyday. Eventually, you did get a job again. Eventually, you did pick up your life. Right. But you weren't a lot of fun to be around. So eventually your friends came around less and less. I don't know why they're telling me this, but your twin's name was Maggie at the time. I very rarely get names of people in previous lifetimes. I don't know why that's significant.
That's funny, because one of the songs that I've been listening to over and over again has that in it. Rage Against the Machine song that has that in the song. It's a Bob Dylan song, but yeah, that's funny. Maggie's Farm, yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so crazy. All right. Well, there's a reason for that.
So how did all of this result in a speech impediment?
We're not there yet. We need to go through 2 more lifetimes to get the full picture. So,
okay, let's do it.
It's setting up the tone, though, of the repressed emotion. Okay. Repressed emotion, whether it comes out through like a physical ailment or whether it comes out through you actually expressing it or getting it out in some healthy way, it's going to come out regardless. Okay. Is there anything else that we need to see about that lifetime that we're just looking at? Yes. Okay. So let's keep going. Maggie was the only one that continued to check in on you. The rest of the friends sort of fell by the wayside because of the fact that you had really gotten to a place of just going to work, coming home, doing nothing. Like you were just somber all the time. There was no coming out of it. It's like you became a shell of a person. Okay. And Maggie was the one person that would come through and actually make you laugh. She would like cook for you and bring you food and help you in various places and various times. She did eventually get married to somebody who very much understood her relationship with you. And they were actually really okay with her helping you and taking care of you as well. It's like you became sort of part of their family. Okay. I'm hearing you became like an uncle to their kids, because you didn't have any kids of your own in that lifetime. You did eventually meet somebody else. This was later in life. I'm hearing decades after. You didn't get married again, but you at least started a relationship with somebody that started to help heal that pain. But it was as if you were still going through the motions, because you didn't feel anything, even a fraction of what you had felt for your wife, for this other person. Okay. And I'm seeing Maggie look over at you, and she's actually feeling very hopeful that you're talking to this other person and hopeful that you're going to make it through. Oh, interesting. Okay. Your soul decided to take one of your exit points at that time.
Is that suicide?
No, you didn't commit suicide, but you had some sort of, well, that's a weird way of putting it. Thank you. There were like, it was some sort of cardiac event. Okay. Well, all right. It was a heart attack. Sometimes the words that my guides give me, I'm like, I would never talk like that. It's a cardiac event. Okay. So yeah, you had a heart attack, and it was shortly after you had met this other woman.
Okay.
Your soul was basically like, he's just going through the motions. He's not going to move forward in this particular incarnation. He's very stuck. So we might as well just like call it. So there's no more damage that gets done, and then, start over in the next lifetime. And that's where we're going to go next.
Okay.
That was a tough one for your twin, though. She was there when you died, and that was really hard for her.
Okay.
All right. So let's take a look at the next lifetime, please. Is this the one right after this one? Yes. As you came into this next lifetime, as an infant and as a baby, as a toddler, you were very calm, almost too calm for a child. There was an energy about you that was almost unsettling, almost like you were not necessarily alive. You're still carrying in that energy from the previous lifetime. It's a numbness. Oftentimes when people have grief and they come into the next lifetime, they carry that grief with them. You didn't carry the grief, you carried the numbness. Mm-hmm. The grief was still there, but it was just sort of buried under all of the numbing, if you will.
Okay.
And because of the numbing, like you were super chill. You were a super chill baby, super chill child, super chill toddler. Where like most kids are like running around and playing, you're like standing there quietly, like looking at things and, just kind of like keeping to yourself.
Interesting.
And your parents are like, oh my God, is there something wrong with him? Is he not? Because you were not actually speaking for quite some time.
Okay.
You didn't speak until you were almost 3.5, which I think is unusual. I don't know what time kids actually start speaking. I think
that's typically unusual. Yeah.
A lot of times when kids don't speak, they want to speak, like they really want to speak. And so they'll make noises, they'll grunt, they'll do whatever they can to make themselves known. You wouldn't even do that. You were just basically like the quietest kid. And your parents were like, what is going on? Like, why is he not responding? Like, why isn't he making his needs known? They were concerned, but they weren't concerned because you seem to be a generally content child. But yeah, it was just this overarching idea that you were somehow just not all there. Oh, interesting. Okay. So I love this kind of stuff. So babies and kids, like toddlers, they have a tendency to be super connected to the divine. Okay. And they're still connected to their souls really, really solidly as children. And it's why, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but like when you walk by a kid and they look at you, like it's like they can see your aura. They just have this look about them that they can see more than what you know that you can see. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You knew as a child and as a baby that the longer you didn't speak, the more connected into your soul and to the universe that you could be. So basically part of the reason why you didn't speak until you were much older is because you wanted to stay connected to your soul and to the divine and to everything that was. Because the more you were connected to the divine, the less you felt the pain. Because if you think about it, the pain and the grief is connected to our human suits, right? It's connected to our human avatars. It's not connected to our souls.
Yeah.
As a soul, you're all good. But then you come down into the human suit and then you have to put on all that grief and you have to put on all that experience and all of those things. So you did that and you're fine, but you're like, but I'll still keep that door open to my soul so I can see the light much better and I can see what's going on and I can feel that love within myself. And it's going to be easier for me to go through this life knowing that connection is there.
Okay.
So you started speaking, like I said, around 3.5. The more you started speaking, the more that door closed on that connection to your soul. And it's not like the speech itself was the culprit of closing the door. It's like the more you sort of integrate yourself into human society and human world, that's where you start taking on the belief systems of what everybody else is doing around you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You take on your belief systems of your parents and everybody else. And so that's what kind of creates that separation between you and your soul and the divine. It was almost as if you were very careful about how much you spoke when you first started learning to speak too. You only spoke when absolutely necessary, when you needed something. And it was because of this that you learned that the less you spoke, the more connected you were. Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. This is woven in pretty good here. It's rooted not only in this grief of this previous lifetime that happened, but then also the discovery that the less rooted you are into this life, the more you can be connected to your soul, the more you can actually move forward in what you're doing.
Interesting.
All right, so then let's go into the third lifetime then, please. This doesn't feel sequential. Where is this one going? Where is this one in the whole scheme of things? You understand that time is not linear.
Yes. Yeah.
So all of the lifetimes that we outlined for you are not necessarily linear either. We live our lifetimes completely out of order.
Okay.
Right. That is something that I always have to keep in mind. They're having me mention this to you because it was a conversation that I was having actually recently with a friend of mine. And we were talking about how like you can live your lifetimes completely out of order. So like the lifetime I lived, let's say back in the 1800s, that lifetime could be in my future, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't live them linearly. We live them in the way that we need to live them, in the way that makes sense. And sometimes it can be linearly. It doesn't mean that that doesn't happen, but it does make a difference as to how we need to learn the lessons that we need to learn or what we're meant to learn in a particular lifetime.
Understood.
It makes sense given the childhood that you had in this previous lifetime that we just looked at, because basically what your soul and what your human self was saying was like, okay, if I determined that I was able to stay connected to my soul by not speaking and by being somewhat isolated, is there something to the idea of being a monk or a priest that is silent? Is there something to that where I will be able to stay connected to the divine and to my soul if I am in a silent sect of some sort? This is actually going into a different era. You decided to incarnate. This is somewhere in Asia. Oh, okay. You decided to be a Buddhist monk. That's good. This is one of those lifetimes that we have when we decide to just kind of take it easy for a lifetime, that we're not learning any sort of really big lessons. Okay. We're just going to kind of take it easy for a little bit because maybe you've gone through a couple of pretty tough lifetimes, which looking back at these couple of lifetimes, even though the one that we looked at with the child, we didn't see a big portion of that, you did have a couple of pretty tough lifetimes. This is sort of that lifetime where it's a little bit easier. Some people might say that it's not easier if you're sort of isolated and as a monk, sort of devoting your life to God. It's kind of like a respite, if you will, from a lot of horrible things happening. Okay.
Yeah.
Although there were things going on around you politically and within the place where you were, your life in particular was relatively peaceful.
Okay.
And I'm getting that this is actually what you were doing as well. And it was actually part of your goal to not derail what you had already learned and everything that you were trying to do.
Okay.
There's nothing particularly of note about this lifetime. It's just something they want you to know about simply because it is hard for you to start to express now what you're feeling based on your connection to yourself versus your connection to your soul. That's what it is. So the speech impediment was created in this lifetime because you're having a hard time connecting between what you want to communicate versus your soul and versus your human. Okay. In this lifetime, when you were the monk, you always communicated from your soul, from your heart. Okay. And this was easy for you to do. But the problem is that when you communicate from your heart and your soul only, and you don't check in with your physical body and your human self is still having experiences and having reactions to them. So you still need to actually check in with that part of yourself and express those emotions, whatever they happen to be. Essentially, you spent kind of a whole lifetime spiritually bypassing everything. Okay, that's fine. You can do that, but then you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to figure out how to express. This lifetime that you're in currently is about finding that really nice sweet spot of, okay, how can I express what I'm feeling in a healthy way? And how can I connect to my soul and be super connected to the point where I am not acting out of the emotions that I'm having? Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. This lifetime, a lot of things probably ended up being in this lifetime. I mean, the early part of my lifetime I was bullied. I've probably buried that deep down inside and thought that would never affect me again. I've spent my life ignoring it up until probably the last half a year. So I've spent the majority of my life ignoring that and putting that so deep down inside and saying to myself, it happened and it will never hit me again. And like everything is opening up again. So yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of the reason why this opens up again is simply for you to heal it. So every time something like this comes up and you're like, I thought that was in the past, I didn't have to deal with that again. Every single time that happens, this is going to be a place where you're going to dive straight into that emotion. Okay. So we're going to do a little bit of that work right now if you're ready.
Yes.
Okay. And I would like you to imagine that this version of yourself, this child that was being bullied when you were younger in this lifetime, imagine connecting with him.
Okay.
And I would like you to ask him how he feels about how he's being treated right now.
Alone, isolated, and why is God doing this to him?
Let's have him take a deep breath. And I would like you to hold both of his hands. And I want you to help him to create his own belief system about God's role. You have a lot of knowledge, universal knowledge and information within you that you can share with him, that you can help him to understand why things like that have happened.
Up until about a year ago, I still believe that. Up until the spiritual awakening, people, whenever they asked me, I said, I don't believe because God would never allow that. But probably a year ago, only a year ago, I believed that all the souls have a purpose and all those people had a purpose and they served it. I wish I can go back and tell him that back then, but I'm telling him that
you're telling
today.
him now. And so having this compassion for this little version of yourself, for having that anger, for having that sadness and grief for what happened, it doesn't diminish it.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with having sadness and grief over something that happens that is really awful.
Right.
But it is about empowering yourself to be able to understand that blaming anyone, either God or yourself or your family or anybody else for things that you feel, just simply perpetuate the emotion.
Understood.
So what it is that I would like you to ask him now is, what does he need right now in this moment to feel safe, secure, and loved?
He needs to be held, hugged, because he's never felt that. He's never been hugged. He's never been saved or felt safe.
Can you do that for him now?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of feel like I don't want to let go.
And you don't have to. You can keep him with you as long as you want.
Okay.
And how does that feel for him?
It's good, and he doesn't understand it because he's never been hugged. He's never felt safe either.
Does he feel safe now?
No.
Can you ask him why?
Because he's always alone, or he feels that he's always alone, and he never feels safe.
One of the things that I would like to shine a light on is that sometimes when we have experiences when we are very young, where the points of connection, the points where we feel we should be receiving love, are not safe. We immediately draw those conclusions that loving or somebody who's trying to love us is unsafe. Or connecting to somebody, let's say it's friends, like you were saying, if you were being bullied, like you wanted to connect to maybe some of the other kids, and they made it very clear that it wasn't safe for you to connect to them. And that has to do with their own wounding. That doesn't have to do with yours. But then it in turn created more wounding for yourself.
Okay.
So when you determine that connecting to somebody is not safe, what does that create within you?
Anger.
And that anger makes it really difficult to connect to somebody else, doesn't it?
Yeah. It also doesn't allow anybody else to come inside. It's protecting. It's a protection also.
Absolutely. It's that little Muppet in your root chakra. it's such a paradox oftentimes with the things that we deal with in terms of protection, because we want more than anything in the world to connect to someone and to connect to people. But the last time we connected, it was unsafe and it made us feel really bad.
Right.
So then we will refrain from connecting because we know that that was the last time we felt that way. So what needs to happen in order to break that cycle is I need you to ask that little version of yourself if he would feel okay trying to move into new situations in a fearless energy, being open to experiencing whatever it is that it needs to unfold as. So it's not to say that every experience that he wants to connect to is going to be a beautiful, loving experience, but it will be the experience that he needs, whether it's to grow, whether it's to learn how to be more open-hearted, whether it's to work through the wounding that he's had from previous lifetimes or this one. That whatever experience that he's going to have is going to be an experience that's going to help him grow and expand and be more him and be more connected to his soul.
He's open to anything else than what he's experiencing now because he's so miserable, unhappy, and angry.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, sometimes that's what it takes for us to finally open up is the absolute sort of rock bottom of feeling, I can't feel this way anymore. I can't do it. Right?
Yeah.
So what I would like you to also help him to see or understand is that he has you with him. So you have you and your intuition. And if you come across anybody that you're trying to connect with and there is a really big energetic discrepancy, let's say, or there would be something that would potentially hurt you, you'll be able to see it coming from a mile away. And you will be able to help that little boy version of you feel more safe in moving forward with an open heart because he has you to help him through it and to help him see.
Okay.
All right. So how does he feel now?
He feels better. He feels like there's somebody out there who understands him. Because the majority of his life, he felt that he's always been alone and nobody understood him.
Yeah. So I'd like you to ground all of this information into your heart space. Imagine that you are connecting your heart space to that little version of you. You can almost see a cord of beautiful pink light going from your heart to his. And you're sharing all of the information energetically on a quantum level to that little version of yourself. That from here on out, as he grows up, he's going to grow up knowing that he has this information in his heart. It's going to help him through. It's going to help him be stronger. Beautiful. Okay, so let's get back to the topic of the speech impediment to see if there's anything that we can do to help you to move through it, to clear it. Now that we know sort of the origin of it and why it has come up, they're saying that it will go entirely once you have fully reached the embodiment of your communication through your human self and your soul simultaneously. You have to be able to have both of them online and not have them be compartmentalized.
I've been having a tough time connecting to the soul. Is there anything I can do to help that?
Yeah. Doing the exercises that we were just outlining, like expressing the anger, getting it out, getting a lot of these emotions out, that's actually really going to help, because what's preventing you from connecting to the soul is actually the dust cloud of emotion that isn't being cleared. It isn't being dealt with. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. So how do you feel?
I feel better. I feel energized. I'll be honest with you. The fact that I've been listening to the same song, the fact that it's not something that is physical, but I'm understanding that it's, the anger, all of that, it's energizing me. I'm sitting here and I feel like I just had caffeine, I feel just like awake. It's unbelievable.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Beautiful. You're welcome. All right. So we are going to close the Akashic Records. I want to thank Akula, my Akashic guide. Thank you so much for being here and helping us through all of this. Thank you to Archangel Metatron and Archangel Xenophon for giving us the information. The records are closed. The records are closed. The records are closed. Thank you. We want to thank Ryan for his vulnerability and sharing his story for this episode. Today, we have a very special guest. Julia is unfortunately unavailable at this time. She is going through some personal things that she needs to take care of. So she will definitely be returning, not to worry. But Ray has been kind enough to fill in for the time being. Now, Ray Schloss has been a longtime friend as well as a client. Ray has actually just stepped away from a 17-year career at Microsoft to focus on his wellness coaching and his spiritually aligned business. Ray, welcome.
Hey.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your new business, Thriving 24/7?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Annette. First of all, it's great to get to chat with you again this way.
Of
this
course.
Is number 3 for us, right?
Exactly.
I have done a lot of meditation and affirmation production for a company called BrainTap, which is a really cool device that helps you get your brain hemispheres in sync with one another. And then I also do it for individual clients, depending on what their particular needs are. So if someone's struggling with a particular issue, I've got a couple different offerings of how we can align a customized affirmation and meditation track that specifically addresses their needs. And the cool thing is sometimes we do it in the client's voice because actually your subconscious is more likely to believe you if you're using your own voice, or there are people who request that I do it with my voice. And the interesting thing about that is if you have a self-esteem challenge and you may not believe yourself, sometimes it's better if you have someone that you have a measure of respect for, as like a subject matter expert or something, speaking it into your life. So it really just depends on what the client wants. But yeah, I absolutely love helping people through producing meditation and affirmation content, as well as the wellness coaching and business consulting I'm doing now. Thriving247.com is how people can reach out.
Thanks so much, Ray. What were your thoughts about this particular session?
Yeah, I thought it was a very intriguing session, Annette. One of the first things that struck me as we kind of just worked through the topics that Ryan was really trying to inquire about was music. So he talked about his passion for the group Live, and also Rage Against the Machine. But I'm curious as to how common it is in your experience working with, a broad client base over the years, that there's a specific music tie-in, because I really felt this related to my own life when I went through a horrendous Dark Night of the Soul situation, also Twin Flame related. And I listened to Tool almost exclusively for about 18 months. I think on Spotify, I was like in the top 1% of Tool listeners globally that 1 year, when they give you that year-end report. But when I got out of the Dark Night of the Soul, which took 18 months, I couldn't listen to them anymore because I felt that the energy was tied in too strongly of an association with the pain that I was in during that time, and I wanted to move past. So how common is it that someone is going through trauma and maybe either a soulmate relationship or a twin flame relationship has that common thread of a real musical alignment like Ryan was describing?
I haven't found it to be super common in terms of what people come to me to talk about. However, I do know that it is common, if that makes sense. I know that I've experienced it. Even in the session, I mentioned some of the issues that I was having with my favorite band, Depeche Mode, and how there were certain songs. And actually, there was a particular period of time during my Dark Night of the Soul that I couldn't listen to them at all. And actually, weirdly enough, during the darker parts of my spiritual awakening, I couldn't listen to music at all. Like not a single band, nobody. Because like, any single bit of music that I would listen to would just make me uncontrollably sob.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't listen to music for like a year, which that's a huge deal for me because I love music and I listen to music constantly. It just sort of did it for me where I couldn't do it.
It was like, it was just tanking everything that I was. And looking back on it now, I realized that it probably would have helped me get through a lot of what I was going through. So it would have pulled out some of that emotion that needed to come out. But at the time, I was just like, oh my God, it's just making me this crazy emotional mess. Like, I need to stop listening to this music. Sound and music has such a huge impact on everything we do. It's intrinsically tied to our experience as we go through the ascension process. The troubling thing can be that as we go through this process, our tastes in music will change. Your favorite band might not be your favorite band anymore because maybe the lyrics are a little too harsh, or maybe the music itself is in a lower energy. I know I listen to some of the old goth and industrial music that I used to listen to back in my 20s, like, oh God, that's awful. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I used to listen to that. And it's just because it just doesn't resonate with me anymore.
Got it.
It's just like anything else. It's like TV, it's like movies, you know, things that you just can't tolerate anymore that are just not aligned.
Yeah. Good sign of ascension, evolution, and growth.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing all that. Another question then is, you went into what you commonly do with clients, and that is going through the chakra scan and analysis. When you started at the root chakra, that you described there being a filter on that. Now, that was the first time I'd ever heard that type of term. So maybe you could help us understand, what is it like when someone has a filter on a chakra?
So I can actually zoom out a little bit on that, because let me tell you that my guides give me the wackiest imagery when it comes to that kind of stuff. Initially, when I first started doing chakra scans, it was pretty basic. It was like, okay, I was seeing like whether it was really bright or really dim, or maybe there was a dark shadow over it or something like that, which I still do see those things. My guides have gotten super creative in showing me various things on the chakras. So just recently I had a session with a client where they showed it to me like an earthquake. So there was like one half of the chakra that was like higher than the other, and there was this jagged chasm between the two, and it was very dramatic. With Ryan, I think I described it as a Muppet, which was was exactly what it kind of looked like. It was like fuzzy, like a Muppet. The thing is that they'll show it to me in a way that is going to get the message across. So however they can get the message across to me, that's what they're going to do. The one distinction I do like to make, though, with the chakra scan is that when I'm doing it, it is in reference to either the particular subject matter that we're covering or the questions the client has asked. And most of the time it's in reference to past lives. For example, I could do a chakra scan on you, Ray, right now as you currently are. And let's say all of your chakras are beautifully aligned. Okay.
Let's say that. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's do.
Yeah. And then you could ask me a question, say, hey, Annette, can we take a look at one of my past lives for X, Y, and Z reason? Then I would do your chakra scan, and that would completely change. Because what we're doing is we're giving it a frame of reference to a different lifetime. So they're going to give us that roadmap for the lifetimes that we're going to be accessing throughout the course of the session. Each time I get the different imagery, I get different shapes, colors, orientations. Like sometimes I'll see the chakras are actually turned backwards or sideways or in various different ways. So it all is just very individual, and how my guides can get me the messages that I need. To go back to answer your question about the filter, the way that they described it to me was like, okay, I don't want to feel the full brunt of what is going on in the chakra right now. So I'm going to put this filter over it. And it's not that they're consciously doing it. It's not like any of us are going to do this consciously. It's just sort of a result of how we're feeling about any particular situation. So a filter can just kind of like make those feelings less prevalent in any particular lifetime.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that was an interesting component of something I'd never heard of before. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm guessing, being that it was at the root chakra, it did have to do with issues of personal safety and security. Whereas like if it had been, say, at the throat chakra, potentially purposefully not wanting to fully express yourself due to like a fear of rejection or, something along those lines. Yeah.
So yeah, each chakra is different in what my guides show me. And the filter that they showed me on the root chakra, that was literally the first time I had ever seen that before. So they'll show me things that I've never seen before, just in order to get the message across.
Okay, so thanks for explaining that. And another question regarding how the chakra systems work. As you continued through the clearing, you indicated that there was an alignment to the primary purpose of the session, which was Ryan wanting to get more information about his speech impediment, and that you saw that there were some situations with the heart and throat chakra that were contributing to that impediment. How frequently, one, do people have hindrances like a speech impediment follow them from incarnation to incarnation? And two, have you seen before where a challenge that someone came to you for help is actually attached in a way to a chakra, so that helping to clear the chakra is, important to the overall healing of the person?
When it comes to something that can follow us from lifetime to lifetime, that's pretty much everything. Everything can follow us from lifetime to lifetime. The challenge with this is that it really depends on A, how deep the trauma goes, B, how much you've been working on it. So how many lifetimes you've been working on this particular thing to sort of help clear it. And then also it really depends on what happened, how it affected your energy, the state of your energy at the time. The fact that it came out for him as a speech impediment is not necessarily something that would happen for somebody else. So somebody else could have a very similar set of circumstances, but then maybe their issue that comes up for them when they are in that state of imbalance, maybe that comes up as heart palpitations, or maybe it comes out as migraines or something like that, right? So it's not necessarily an exact science of, oh, well, because you go through X, Y, and Z, that would, of course, result in a speech impediment. That's not really what I've seen in terms of the trajectory. It is basically about how your body, your physical body, processes. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you incarnate into a physical body, your body is going to have certain weaknesses based on your ancestral line, based on your DNA, based on your energy coming in, how much psychic debris you're bringing with you from previous lifetimes. And all of that can have an effect on what actually would happen as you are going through this next lifetime. For Ryan, it became very, very clear that the reason why it ended up affecting his speech is because throughout the course of the trauma, he was having a hard time expressing himself. And then he realized that, oh, I don't need to express myself. I can actually go within and be in that balanced space within myself with my guides in the universe, i.e., when he decided to be a monk. And then when he was that child that didn't want to speak because he was still connected to the other side. So it was almost like a crutch that he was like, oh, this is how I can survive. This is how I can get through this trauma, is by not speaking. That was the tool that he used to sort of get himself out of it. But then once you're out of it, you have to actually go back and address the reason why you had to use that as a crutch to get out of whatever that trauma was. We do anything that we can to get ourselves out of the muck. And I know, Ray, you've experienced this in this lifetime where it's like you will literally do anything to not feel as crappy as you feel. So you will, try anything, do anything to make sure that you don't feel crappy anymore. And sometimes it's necessary. So once you don't feel crappy anymore, it's not like, oh, okay, I'm fine now. I don't need to deal with that. No, you still need to go back and deal with the trauma. You've crawled out of the mud, but you're still covered in mud right now. And so you need to actually go back and clean yourself off, basically. That's kind of what has happened. It's like he finally got out of the trauma for the most part, but then he needs to actually go back and say, oh, okay, so now I need to reconnect my soul with my body, with my energy field, and with my chakra system. Like all of those things need to come back together.
Very interesting. And another part that evolved through that in the course of the session regarding the not speaking as a child, and as you described him choosing to be a monk for a while and going very internal, and then kind of carrying that energy with him into this incarnation. I'm just curious, frequently, especially with the propagation of autism in our world today, children who are not speaking at what was considered a normal developmental level at a particular age are rapidly being classified as being autistic.
Mm.
How do you discern where there's a very deep spiritual connection to the situation that Ryan has, like with a speech impediment, versus it could be developmental, it could be something that might be genetic? I wonder how many children who are diagnosed with autism and medicated and everything else that happens with them may have, this may be a carryover of them likewise needing to say, hey, I've only been going within deeply for the last time around, and now I'm going to have to really learn how to express myself again. And it's just going to take me a little longer. Right. So I wonder what the prevalence of that today. What do you think about that?
I could not be more thrilled that you asked that question. And let me tell you why. I have been preparing for this type of conversation for months. I'm going to do a full channeled episode about autism as well as ADHD, because I have been getting messages from my guides, from Akula and from the universe about ADHD and autism. It's actually been over several client sessions. The answer to that question is it's all about your spiritual journey. One of the things that I've been told about autism as well as ADHD is that on a basic level, it is essentially the in-between during a spiritual awakening. It's a transition from living in your 3D life to the 5D life. One of the channels talks about, take a look at some of the symptoms or some of the behaviors. A lot of autistic people can tap into just absolute awesome knowledge. One autistic child could be just an absolute math whiz, right? It's like they're connecting directly into universal knowledge and universal consciousness. And so they're able to just whiz through anything that they can do when it comes to math, let's say. The thing that actually becomes difficult is we as a society have created this very cookie cutter way that we're saying everybody needs to be like this. Everyone needs to be like this. Everyone needs to learn like this. Everyone needs to memorize things like this. Everybody has to be exactly the same. And so as we're breaking out of those templates that don't work for anyone anymore, really. Maybe they work for a few people still, but for the most part, people are going to start finding their own way in what their talents, their universal talents are. And they're going to have to go follow those as opposed to following what is going to make money or what their parents are telling them to do or what society is telling them to do. It's a much bigger topic that, like I said, I'm going to do a full episode on. It's just a different form of moving through your spiritual awakening and your spiritual journey. So ADHD and autism are those particular spaces in which we are crossing from the 3D life to the 5D life, where time and space are shifting, where our reality is shifting. There are times when our physical bodies either are trying to adjust and don't exactly know what to do with the new energy and information. And so it does what it needs to in order to get through it.
Got it.
So, it's the more I see these types of things, the more I do these types of readings, I have to say that a majority of the things that people are faced with in a lifetime are all connected to the energy. They're all connected to our ascension. They're all connected to our ancestral line, to our previous lifetimes. It's all connected.
Got it. Very interesting. And when you see the complete lack of an agreed upon solution on behalf of the mainstream on why there's this incredible increase in autism and neural diversity and I guess it's even a positive step that people are calling it neurodiversity now, which means,
yes,
hey, maybe we don't all think the same thing. And now I've heard multiple times like, well, it's not the autistic child's problem. They're thinking on a level in some cases that is beyond the norm, kind of much of what you described, right? Of the standardized, accepted behavioral development patterns of humanity, and they don't fit that. So there's something wrong with them. Whereas now people are starting to realize it might be us who are incapable of understanding the speed at which they are perceiving their reality. Another topic that Ryan really got into soul family planning of contracts. He had what sounds like multiple lifetimes with this core soul family group of the 5 of them, one being his twin flame. Then he got into the fact that he didn't marry his twin flame, but he did marry his soulmate, and then she passed. It does seem very unfair that we forget what our contracts are, or that on the other side, we agree to these things. Why do we forget, so deeply forget, to the point where unless you're on an awakening spiritual journey, you don't even know what they are? And so you're just going through life like, oh, these things are happening to me.
I'm going to actually ask the guides if they can give us a little channeled message about when we have our soul planning meeting. Why do we sometimes choose things that are seemingly insurmountable, that are sometimes, quite frankly, we're like, huh? Why did my soul choose that? That's really dumb, or that's ridiculous, or, any of the things that our human selves might think. So just give me a second. We find this question incredibly funny. And the reason why is because the way that Annette is thinking about it in her head is sort of like a comedy that is unfolding, slapstick comedy where somebody's trying to make a plan and everything just goes wrong and everybody's running into each other and everything just falls drastically apart. That is somewhat of what happens, but not to the extent that you think it is. When your soul creates the soul plan, there is a stretch to it. There is a little bit of give to it. It has mobility. It's able to shift and change as you shift and change in your human existence. It is a rough template that you come down with that says that you are going to accomplish A, B, and C things. Now, you may not accomplish one of those things, and that is okay. The direness you have on this planet as a human, that things are incredibly important for you to do now, or things are incredibly important for you to achieve now, it's not as dire or important on the other side. So when you create this loose template, it is with the intention as well as the idea and knowledge that when your human self is coming down here, that your human self is going to make their own free will decisions, that things are going to change and shift, and that it may not necessarily go exactly the way that you think it will. Most of the time, your soul is quite surprised at some of the decisions that your human self makes, because it's not something that they would have necessarily seen coming when they had this planning, so to speak. Now, understand that every individual human has their own energy field and their own unique signature. So even if it is the same soul, each human is different, even if it is a previous version of yourself. So the signature is different. The energy is different. The energy is different on the planet. So the energy is different on the planet now than it was in Annette's previous lifetimes. And so she is going to react differently on a human level to certain things based on the fact that Earth herself is ascending. People around her are ascending. So therefore, that's going to have an influence on how she moves forward in her trajectory. So there are so many factors, but as you have seen, Ray, as well as Annette has seen, that the orchestration that we have on the other side is pretty tight. We are able to really weave in the most minute of details to make sure that everything is working out for you the way that it is meant to. Now, it is up to you on whether or not you are going to notice that miracle and how those things are woven in and how those synchronicities sort of unfold. And there are times when you notice them and there are times where you don't, and that's okay. We don't need the recognition or the accolades for being able to weave that story so it is exactly what you need in exactly the right timing. And then when you come down here, there are adjustments that are made. There are things that change. There are upgrades to be made where your experience is now better than it was going to be when you first made the plan. It is for that reason that you are not allowed to know these things, because if you did, you would never strive for anything higher than what you're currently experiencing. You would just say, this is my plan. I'm going to go live my plan. Versus maybe having a much more rich experience based on some other experience that your soul never even saw coming. There are so many different factors and so many different things that go into the soul plan. And there are souls out there that is their job, to help with soul plans, to help create those soul plans so they have that room to grow and change. This is why we don't like people to get hung up on certain destiny points, because destiny points are important. They are there for you to make sure that you hit those specific events or meet those specific people. To focus on just that one point is not necessarily beneficial for you. We don't do it to punish you or to make things difficult. It is simply done because it is the best way for all of the humans and all of the souls to have the experiences that they want to have. You often forget this. You want to have these experiences. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here on this planet. You would just stay on the other side. Your human self may not like it, but as you accumulate the growth and the knowledge and the connection over time, you will start to see the reason for it. And that is always the case when you go through some sort of challenge. You don't want to go through the challenge when you're going through it. Nobody does. But then once you get over the challenge, you see how much you've grown and what you've learned from it. And you can look back on the person that you were and say, wow, yeah, I can see why I went through that and it was worth it. Now, not everybody's going to be there yet. And maybe that looking back on it and seeing that it's worth it, maybe that would take several lifetimes. But it's all relative to what your current experience is. So we don't mean to diminish your current experience and the challenges that you're going through. We wanted to give you an explanation and an answer to your question. And we understand that there are things that are really hard on this planet. We don't deny that. But we also want to say that it is something that you all have signed up for. Take heart in the fact that you have full support on the other side, always. And if there ever is something that is too much for you to handle, all you need to do is ask for help and help will be given.
Okay. Well, thank you, Annette, for sharing that message from your guides. To net that all out, hey, you signed up for it, right? Because somewhere on the other side, you're like, yeah. It seemed like a good idea at the time, just like every marathon I've ever run, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, signing up for this seemed like a good idea at the time until you hit like mile 23. And then you're like, I am so stupid. Why did I ever do this again?
Right? It only took me one half marathon to say, nope, not doing that again.
Yeah. Okay. So, hey, follow-up question with this, because it got to a couple different points in the discussion with Ryan where it seemed like there were points that had to do with living lives out of what we consider to be linear order. So how does that play out with everything that the guides just described? Okay, how can you do, on one hand, appears to be soul planning, which is B is going to follow A. And then in the quantum reality of time doesn't exist outside of 3D land the way that we perceive it to be now. Like if everything's happening, like in the movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which to some degree, from what quantum physics is saying and everything, that's kind of the way the universe really does work.
Yep.
So how does that potentially work where you think, oh, okay, well, in the last incarnation, Ryan had a situation where he had suffered trauma. So he decided to take a lifetime as a monk to really go within. And now he's living through having to undo that process of not being able to effectively communicate. How does that work, like in soul planning, if we can live lives out of what we believe to be linear time?
Well, if you can imagine that if you're on the other side and you're able to see all that is, we're talking about every time period, every lifetime, past, present, and future. You can see everything from all corners of the universe, from everywhere, all planets, all universes, everything. You can see everything. You're saying to yourself, okay, I need to have this particular experience. What is the best possible way that I can have this experience? Where is the best possible time that I can have this experience for my soul? Maybe the best possible time shows up in the 1600s, but yet the last lifetime you just lived was in 1895. You can decide to incarnate in any space and time. Now, this is where the sort of mind-bendy things come in, because you're like, well, isn't that going to change the course of everything because you're sort of now inserting yourself into another space and time? No, because it's all happening simultaneously. So all of these decisions are being made simultaneously. So things that have played out in our past are not the past for the souls that are on the other side. So if you're on the other side, it's just a giant soup of time and experiences. And so basically you're like, okay, well, that looks like a really good spot for me to incarnate in. So I'm going to go and incarnate there. Can people incarnate linearly? Sure, you could. If that was part of what your plan was, then that's what you felt like you wanted to experience. You totally could. Could it be that you jump around as well? Yeah, absolutely. It just depends on what you are looking for in terms of the experience and in terms of what you are meant to learn and grow with. It's the ones that we need to tap into that are sort of the closest to us. So the lifetimes that I tap into for my clients, it's the ones that are the most relevant for whatever it is that they happen to be working on. I like to use the term, it's the closest to them, as opposed to like, oh, it's the most recent. I use the terminology in my sessions often, oh, this was 8 lifetimes ago, this was 10 lifetimes ago, because it's easier for our brains to understand. But there have been times when I've done sessions where I'm like, oh yeah, that was 8 lifetimes ago. And then I'll see something that looks like it's in, let's say, the 1940s. And it was like, oh yeah, that was like 6 lifetimes ago. And I was like, how is that 6 lifetimes ago for this person? Like that doesn't add up. And once I started seeing things like that, I was like, wow, this is why. It's because it's all out of order. Like I said, I don't have the full context. I'm only seeing the little snippets that I need to see for the client, for them to know. There is a whole big picture out there that I'm not privy to and probably wouldn't ever be privy to because it would not really serve a purpose.
Got it. Oh, right. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah. I really like how you described it's the closest lifetime rather than the oldest lifetime or the newest, but just in proximity to our soul being. Okay. Another question then would be inner child work and going back to anger with God because of life traumas that were suffered and endured. The concept of inner child, I definitely don't fully understand. Mm-hmm. When you think of like, okay, there's this part of me that is me, but it's this younger encapsulation of my consciousness in some way. Is it your subconscious identity? You know, that it's always there with us as part of our experience, but it's not a separate entity. Sometimes when people describe doing inner child work, it's like, oh, look, here's little Annette, or here's little Ray, or here's little Ryan, and they're part of you, and you need to hold them and nurture them and give them the love that they wanted and needed through your early lifetime that part of you didn't receive, so you have to self-parent. Mm-hmm. I think that people just go, oh, it's my inner child. Oh, okay, it's inner child work, without really understanding the mechanics of it. So in Ryan's situation, you know, there was an interesting depiction of that concept of like, there's this part of him that doesn't want to release or feels incapable of releasing, and that's holding on to trauma, which is affecting his current now moment of life. What is inner child and how do we effectively work with it and why? So inner child can be referred to as your subconscious. And I would say, I'm not a psychologist in any way, but like I could say that psychology would probably define it as such. The wider definition that I would give it is your inner child is in fact your heart. Giving people a visualization of a smaller version of themselves, like a little child version of themselves, serves several purposes. The first purpose it serves is you are most likely not going to be angry or upset at a child. And so to have a child version of yourself, you see a more innocent version of yourself. You see a very pure version of yourself. That is your heart. Your heart, your soul is pure always. So what you're trying to get to the bottom of is, what is it that is causing the pain, the grief, the trauma, the anger? What is it that's causing it? And why is your heart feeling that? Oftentimes, I will try to get people to connect to their heart space, and I will tell them to imagine a point of light at the top of their head and allow that light to go down all the way down into their center of their heart space. And I will ask them to ask questions of their heart. And some people can do it, and some people have a harder time with that.
it is much easier to be able to connect to a visualization of a little version of yourself and connect into those memories that may have been lost or those emotions that may not have been dealt with when you were a child. Because the thing is that you have tools now that you didn't have when you were 3, 4, 5, 6, even, 0, like before you were born. You have these tools now, and that version of yourself was still very much connected to the other side, very connected to the divine. To be able to give context to what has happened is allowing that healing to take place. And this is where this work can make all the difference in the world, because not only can you sort of go back in time in your timeline to start healing the previous versions of yourself, but you can also go back into past lives and heal those previous versions of yourself. So if you can imagine the constant as being your heart, you're healing the previous versions of your heart that have been broken or that have been hurt, that have been in anger, that have had all these various different emotions. So that is my definition of it in terms of how I've seen it and how I work with it. Now, everybody's going to have probably a slightly different take on it and a slightly different way that they explain their own inner child work. But either way, it's however you can get to the point of understanding why you were wounded when you were wounded, why the experience happened, how you can move through it with the tools that you have now, how you can look at it from a different perspective, how you can forgive the people that were involved, and how you can move forward in grace.
Got it. Very wonderful description of how that works. And, I think as you described it with being a component of like, well, you could perceive it as it being your heart, right? And the trauma that your heart has suffered over time. Mm-hmm. That seems an easier concept to follow than, oh, I have this little person inside of me right? that needs a hug. My little inner person needs a hug. So, okay. And, final question on this. There was some discussion about numbers, right, as being signs. And how do we know when we're not trying to find something that's not really there to help us, like you said earlier, do anything to get out of the pain that we're in, right? To try to make any sense that we can out of these challenges that we're going through. But then also, and I'm apologizing if you can hear my German Shepherd barking in the background. But then also,
hi, Bodhi.
How do he said "grr"? He's as a neurodiverse German Shepherd. That's his
he's
word.
Such a cutie.
So then the other part of it being, the angel sharing, well, this always works out for good on the other side of change. Like change is always going to manifest for good. I would believe that there are many people listening to this podcast, and perhaps you, certainly I'll put myself into this category, that you can look at certain changes where you're like, yeah, I've yet to see or experience anything positive that came out of that change. And like you said earlier, maybe it's multiple lifetimes before we see something like that. But
yeah,
it almost seems a little too good to be true that all change leads to positive things.
Okay. So regarding the signs, they're giving me a really wonderful visual of I love this. Okay. So you're walking along your path and you see an 1111, and it's like they're showing it to me almost like a musical. Like you go up to the 1111 and you're like, yes, it's 1111. It's a sign. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. What does this mean? This means everything is working out for me. This means that my guides are here for me. This means everything. Oh my God, I'm so happy that this sign is here. And so you're completely focused on the 1111. You're completely focused on that one sign. Okay. That's what they do not want you to do. So they want you to take that sign and say, cool. It's a sign. I'm going to put that in my satchel bag. Okay, cool. And then I'm walking along and I'm seeing another sign. Oh, there's a 1212. Okay, cool. I'm going to grab that one and I'm going to put that in my satchel bag too. And then I'm going to grab all of the signs that I'm getting throughout the course of the day. And then maybe at the end of the day, you're going to go into a reflection. You're going to be like, wow, cool. Okay. Thanks, angels, for giving me all of those wonderful signs. what is the message that you have for me right now? And so maybe you're going to go and you're going to look up the 1111 and the 1212 and then the otter that you saw and then the, a couple of other things. And then you're going to be like, oh, okay. So that makes up a complete message. So the problem is that often we get hung up on one sign or one thing and say, oh yeah, that's okay. I know what that is. And that's what they're trying to tell me. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's a compound message that they're trying to give you like little snippets of, and you have to like put the whole message together at a later time. That's certainly happened to me many times actually, where it's like, oh, okay. Once I got all the messages, then I'm like, okay, now I can put it all together. When it comes to signs, yes, they are usually pointing you in the direction of where you need to go or giving you encouragement. There are times when they'll give you signs because they're giving you like hey, you're about to walk into a pothole. Please don't do that. It is very much about being able to be the neutral observer and say, okay, cool, getting those signs. Let's see what we need to do to interpret them. Because the one thing I have discovered is that the universe is going to give you the signs in plenty of time. It's very rare that I've found that I need to get like a rapid succession of signs because something is going to happen very quickly. It has happened before, but it's pretty rare. The overall message on signs is take it easy. Wait for the full message. Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The challenge with being able to see that all change or all directions lead to something better is that you might just be looking at, let's say, this 4-year period or this lifetime, or maybe 4 lifetimes or 6 lifetimes. You're not looking at the full trajectory. They're giving me the analogy of like watching the stock market. If you were to look at your gains right now and you see that they fell like 23% today, but then you're not looking at the overall graph from when you first started investing until now, you're going to see that huge loss of 23% right now. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, that upward climb is going to be a pretty steady line that goes upwards.
Wow. Did you, this just you interpreting what happened to me earlier before we got on this call?
Oh, really? No, they just gave me that analogy. Like they just popped it in my head. So
you know what? Yeah, no, in all seriousness, I checked on something a little earlier and I was like, I'm not looking any deeper because I'm gonna have to just let it go and let it ride.
That is essentially what we're talking about is it's the cumulative growth and trajectory of the soul. You're never going to tank all the way to the bottom again. It'll never happen. So I often talk about when you are ascending and you go into lower energies, I can guarantee you right now, Ray, that when you go into your lower energies, when you go into your sadness, your grief, your pain, your anger, it is not nearly as low as it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Agreed.
It's all relative to the space that you're in energetically. When we look at the bigger picture, yes, everything is always working out for us the way that it needs to. Now, if you talk to somebody who is being abused or somebody who's going through some really bad atrocity right now, they're definitely not going to have that perspective. And I don't blame them. And I think it would actually sort of do them a disservice to say, oh, well, you're going through this hardship, but it's all for your highest good. I think that would be really crappy, right? You can't say that to somebody who's going through something like that. So the challenge comes with, okay, if I recognize that everything is here for me to learn and to grow, what do I do with the information that I don't know or I can't see the connection in what my forward trajectory is? And the answer is you try to let it go as much as possible and try not to find the why in it just yet. If you can't see the why in it, let it go.
Yeah. Well, Annette, thank you. That was a phenomenal recap of what was, as I started in the beginning, there was a lot going on in that session.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of these sessions are pretty action packed. So there's a lot of information in each one.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ray. Thank you for taking the time and for all of your beautiful, thoughtful questions.
You're very welcome. It is my pleasure as always, my friend.
So stay tuned for next week is going to be the season 1 finale. So we are going to take a little bit of time off. We already have 16 sessions to go through for season 2. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a break, and then we're going to start diving right in and recording episodes for season 2. In the meantime, I will be doing some channeled messages here and there, and I am going to be doing that full episode channeled message regarding ADHD and autism. I very much look forward to presenting that to you. Thanks, Ray, and we will talk soon.
Thank you, Annette. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Ray. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to get in touch with either myself or Julia, feel free to head to my website at infinitesoullove.com. You can also follow me on all social media at infinitesoullove1111. If you feel called, it would be greatly appreciated if you leave a review for the podcast. It does really help get this out to everyone who needs to hear the message. Thanks so much, and see you next time.